Part 1, Unit 16, Gateway. The weakness of local networks lies in their self-containment, for they lack input as well as outreach. In a classic study of urban politics, Herbert Gans found that neighborhoods with the highest levels of solidarity often were unable to block unfavorable policies and programs for lack of ties to possible allies elsewhere in the city. It was for this reason that Gans referred to them as urban villagers. As the opposite of local networks, cosmopolitan networks offer little solidarity and have little capacity to comfort and sustain members. But members benefit from a constant flow of new information and from the great reach of their influence, even if it tends to be somewhat lacking in strength. Local networks tend to be small. In contrast, cosmopolitan networks can be huge. Thus, while the urban villagers lack ties even to their local city government, cosmopolitan network ties often lead into the White House. Unlike the urban villagers, whose loose ties to the outside restrict them within their boundaries, cosmopolitan networks profit from exposure to new information and a more extensive range of relationships. Exercise 1. In 1979, University of Washington psychologist Andy Meltzoff stuck out his tongue at a baby 42 minutes old, then sat back to see what happened. After some effort, the baby returned the favor, slowly rolling out his own tongue. Meltzoff stuck his tongue out again. The infant responded in kind. Meltzoff discovered that babies could imitate right from the start of their little lives, or at least 42 minutes from the start of their little lives. That's an extraordinary finding. Imitation involves many sophisticated realizations for babies, from discovering that other people exist in the world to realizing that they have operating body parts and the same ones as you. That's not a blank slate. That's an amazing, fully operational cognitive slate. Andy Meltzoff found that babies are born with perceptual abilities by observing a 42-minute-old baby mimic the action of Meltzoff sticking out his tongue. Exercise 2. Children in all cultures acquire language through play. Their earliest production of language-like sounds, cooing and babbling, and first words are always playful. Later, children playfully rehearse more complex linguistic constructions, sometimes in monologue when alone. But of course, their language play is influenced by culture. Infants gradually restrict their babbling to the phonemes of their native language and, later, play with the words and grammatical constructions of that language. Children everywhere also engage in constructive play, thereby exercising the crucial human skill of building things. But what they build depends on what they see in the world around them. Children everywhere play in ways that exercise the human mental capacities of imagination and reasoning, but the scenes they imagine and the ideas they rehearse in such play derive from the culture. Children acquire language and practice skills of building and imagining things while playing, which reflects what they hear, see, and experience in the world around them. Exercise 3. All words have to be coined by a wordsmith at some point in the mists of history. The wordsmith had an idea to get across and needed a sound to express it. In principle, any sound would have done. So the first coiner of a term for a political affiliation, for instance, could have used glorg or schmendrick or McGillicuddy. But people are poor at recalling sounds out of the blue, and they probably wanted to ease their listeners' understanding of the coinage rather than having to define it or illustrate it with examples. So they reached for a metaphor that reminded them of the idea, and that they hoped would create a similar idea in the minds of their listeners, such as band or bond for a political affiliation. The metaphorical hint allowed the listeners to understand the meaning more quickly than if they had had to rely on context alone. When wordsmiths needed a sound to express their idea, they chose a useful one that would help remember the idea, not just a random sound. Exercise 4. The status of the group members in a group can be important. Group members with lower status may have less confidence and thus be unlikely to express their opinions. Wittenbaum found that group members with higher status were, indeed, more likely to share new information. However, those with higher status may dominate the discussion, even if the information that they have is not more valid or important. Because they have high status, leaders have the ability to solicit unshared information from the group members, and they must be sure to do so, for instance, by making it clear that all members should feel free to present their unique information, that each member has important information to share, and that it is important to do so. Leaders may particularly need to solicit and support opinions from low-status or socially anxious group members. A person with higher status may control a discussion, but he or she needs to ask a person with lower status for his or her opinion to facilitate sharing of information within a group.